Welcome to the Principal Podcast, where we talk about how the best professional services firms grow. Whether you're looking to scale your firm or learn from the stories of founders and leaders who've done it, you're in the right place. Join us as we interview the best leaders in professional services. Let's get on with the show.
Welcome to the Principal Podcast, a place where we talk about the business of consulting. Whether you're looking to grow your own audience and practice or learn from the stories of leaders in consulting, you're in the right place. I'm your host, John Degnan. Join me as we talk with the best consultants in their niche. Nick Palmer is my partner and managing director of North America at Oaklin Consulting, where he helps global organizations execute complex M&A alliances, joint ventures, and actually deliver long-term value. With decades of experience across industries, he focuses on what most deals miss: execution and integration. In this episode, we unpack how consultants can move beyond strategy and drive real outcomes in high-stakes transformations. Nick, welcome.
Thank you, John. I really appreciate the chance to be here and to speak with your audience, and I'm looking forward to our dialogue.
Thank you. Tell us about yourself.
All right. I am a chemical engineer gone bad back in the late 70s, worked for a now non-existent company known as Union Carbide, which only people of a certain age will remember. After 5 years of process design and those types of things, I got the MBA, went to the dark side, and never came back. I was with McKinsey and Company in Munich, Germany, and in Cleveland, Ohio. At that time in the 80s and early 90s, they were the two centers of manufacturing and technology-related work within the firm. I know that's changed over time. I was a doctoral fellow at Harvard for 5 years, looking into issues of industrial organization. Decided I liked the consulting life better. Went over to Andersen Consulting, which became Accenture, was a partner there, and headed the global alliance and JV consulting practice for a number of years. And then due to some personal circumstances with an illness in the family, a long-term thing, started putting up my own shingle for about a decade. And then signed on with BTD Consulting not quite a decade ago. As you mentioned, BTD Consulting was a very specialty boutique firm that focused on M&A, alliances, joint ventures at a very practical level, not a high leverage type consulting firm or a gray-haired type, which, as you can see, suits me well. BTD were acquired and merged with Oaklin Consulting, based in London, back at the beginning of this year. And we're now just exercising our own skills and all to figure out how to take best advantage of the skills and all that Oaklin have over there, more than a decade of doing consulting work. So, I have become, principally an advisor to senior executives, sort of a guide to teams, very much focus on what happens when you bring two or more organizations together and try to get great results, which when you're sitting in the Harvard Business School classroom always sounds easy. To that world, the big idea is what matters. In practice, what one finds is that's the beginning, and it's not unimportant. The strategic goals are not unimportant. The right partner is not unimportant. But getting from the deal being signed to value being created is a minefield. And talking about it the way that tends to happen at a business school level, or frankly, even in most of the business press, is like discussing whitewater canoeing and telling someone, well, the basic idea is you start here where the water is very smooth, and 2 miles from here, there's another smooth spot where we can have lunch. Ignoring the waterfalls, rock eddies, and branches overhanging that are going to rip your head off between here and there. And what we do is specialize in helping our clients to navigate those rapids, to go from good idea to great practice.
What got you deeply into M&A, alliances, and integration?
Well, part of it, I could tell the story as if it was my long-term plan, and somehow my seventh grade science teacher led me that way. More realistically, when I was doing my doctoral work at Harvard and as a doctoral fellow, I was looking at why industries are put together the way they are, why companies vertically integrate or don't, and why they take various other types of combinations, why joint ventures are formed. And so I had that knowledge. Then when I went back to what was then Andersen Consulting, I fell in to a particular project serendipitously, to be completely frank, at Eli Lilly and Company. the big pharmaceutical company. And in 1998, they decided they were going to create the first Office of Alliance Management as a formal function within the company. And we spent the better part of a year and a half figuring out what alliance management meant. And it was a fascinating project that I was forced to be on the ground, down in the weeds, working with people day to day, figuring out how this job looks, not just how it looks on PowerPoint, not just how it looks in sort of big picture, which we all love to talk about, but how it practically looks when you wake up on Monday morning and have to do something. How it practically works when a partner calls you up and goes, "We're terminating this alliance. You have not lived up to your side of it." Or when a partner goes, "We decided to go with a competitor because we don't think you're a particularly good partner." So I got to live that world very intensely with the folks at Lilly. They've remained very good friends. As a matter of fact, I do a lot of work with the 17-year Chief Alliances Officer at Lilly, David Thompson. I'm flying out tonight to spend a day with him tomorrow. But it was an exposure to a different kind of consulting than I had done before in my McKinsey days and even my early Anderson days. And I liked it. I liked the new dimension of challenge added by different people in different organizations coming together with very different understandings of how to do things. As a matter of fact, one of the interesting things I learned during that work, and it has subsequently over the 25 years since continued to sort of enliven my thinking, is the toughest collaborations and working together are generally not between a good company and a bad company, but between two really good companies. Because two really good companies are confident in what they do. And at a process level, visible, and at a tacit level, how we really do things here, they are rarely compatible by just putting them together. If you've ever been to an M&A conference or an alliance management conference, I will guarantee you within the first two speeches, you will see a puzzle shown at least 4 times with nice little pieces nested like my grandchildren's puzzles. And that is delusional. It's a wonderful concept, but doing it in practice is far more like building a stone wall than it is like putting a puzzle together. So I found the challenge exciting. I also found the people fantastic to work with and really interesting, thoughtful, hardworking people. So I fell into it, to be honest. Luckily, I had a skill set or I had a background that I could pull into it and take advantage of. But had that Lilly project not come along, I might well have ended up doing a different type of organizational and strategic consulting than I ended up doing. But I fell in love with it and have been with that ever since. I was fully bought in by 1999 and wouldn't have changed it for the world.
That's great. That's great. What specific problem are you helping clients solve when it comes to M&A and alliances?
Right now, it is how you anticipate and plan for the inevitable things that are going to go wrong. One of my partners and longtime friend, Carlos Keener, likes to say it's the "we're all going to die" moment. And especially with a client who's never been through a post-merger integration before, for example, there's this sense generally, which is, yeah, we're going to have some problems, but we're going to do a really good job of planning and executing. And that's going to be okay. And what we need to get them aware of is things are going to go wrong, and big things are going to go wrong that you can't completely anticipate or have a contingency plan list for. You are going to be unpleasantly surprised. And sometimes it's going to feel like you are going to die. Hopefully just figuratively, but who knows? There may be those in the audience who've had it more literally at times. And so what we're trying to work on, and I'm involved with a very large consortium with, I think right now we have 7 of the top 10 pharmaceutical companies involved, looking at how to manage alliances in particular, JVs as well, in a fashion that leaves them better prepared to have the management capacity. I'll steer clear of the bandwidth word because it's such jargon these days, but that people are in a position to fight the fire. It would be nice that there were never any fires. There are going to be fires. I was talking to a friend who was on a transplant list for a major organ transplant, and they walked her through all of the difficult scenarios that were possible. And then the social worker worker looked her directly in the face and said, don't think you're going to dodge most of these. You are going to have some of these terrible things happen to you over the 12 months after your transplant. You need to be mentally prepared, you need to be emotionally prepared, and you need to be physically prepared. And I would take that same lesson over into the world of alliances, M&A, and joint ventures. Bad stuff is going to happen. It is going to test your limits, and the better prepared you can be. So the work we're doing right now is very much about how we can narrow the field and focus so that people know how to set priorities, because good management is generally about priorities. It's about, do I work on the things that matter, or do I spend time and waste time doing things that are peripheral to what's going on? And this has led over the last decade to the creation and the expansion of a topic called value inflection points. It was first begun at Lilly by David Thompson and his team back about a decade ago. But we're beginning to use that. We're collecting databases. We had a call this morning about using agentic AI to help us do a little bit better cataloging and capturing of some of these, what seem to be just stories, into a more practical framework. So that's quite exciting. We're working with some of the leading practitioners in the field. It's a wonderful collaboration. A lot of us have gotten to be very good friends through all of it. And we're tackling it. We're tackling it.
Who are your ideal clients today?
Ideal clients. Well, I'll start with those who recognize the complexity of the situation they're in, those who are open to listening but are confident in their own abilities. So I like an executive, I'm thinking of one right now. She is very self-confident, almost to the point that you would find her off-putting. When you start to spend time with her, you very quickly learn that her ears work in proportion to her mouth. Even though it seems like she's being very direct and directive and very self-assured, she is constantly monitoring what's going on around her in a very thoughtful, albeit aggressive way. As I say, I don't know how I come across. I tend not to be a pushy person. She comes across a little bit more aggressive than I, but her ears are extremely high-functioning organisms. So that's it. The other is clients who understand that they don't make decisions, they make trade-offs. Every yes that you give as an executive implies 6 to 20 no's. By saying yes to this, you're saying no to other things. By approving a budget here or by spending your time there, you're not spending it someplace else. And as a senior leader, more so, when you set those priorities, the people around you are trying to read your mind and focus that. So I like those. I guess I could sum it all up for you, John, in a short phrase. I like strong-willed clients who are self-aware.
Okay. In such a high-trust, high-stakes space, how do clients typically find you, and what have you seen work best to build credibility?
Because I am a small entity, me, and for the 10 years between being in big consulting after my wife's illness began and then going back to consulting, I can say with great pleasure that all of the work that I got came to me from people who knew me and said, "Hey, Nick, what are you doing? Why aren't you at Accenture anymore? I'd like to talk to you. Can I work with you?" Those types of things. That's not very practical, but it does say something, especially when you get later in your career, about those relationships that you create. Then beyond that, it is having a point of view. There was a book published, I want to say it's over a decade ago. It's one of the very few business books I've seen that actually is worth the paper it's printed on. And it's called The Challenger Sale. It was by a couple of folks at the conference board. I want to say it was published maybe 12 years ago. And they pointed out how the consulting industry has shifted away from a relationship-based sale, and not just consulting, other things as well. It's no longer taking someone out to the golf course. It's now challenging their thinking and having someone look at you as someone who's willing to stand up to them, yet respects them at the same time. Someone who has a point of view that he's not going to back down on, but that he's willing to get into a dialogue about, and that has a point of view that isn't the conventional wisdom. It's something, oh, that's a different way of framing this problem. Um, when I talk to clients who I've been with a lot, one of the compliments, if you will, I get fairly frequently is, you were the only person we talked to who asked more questions than he told us things during our discussions. You seemed interested in my business. And then when the work started, you seemed to really care about how the business worked. Those things are fairly easy to say, and I would venture any consultant who's worth his or her weight probably says them. I'm gratified when I find out that at least some clients think that I do it in practice. Again, I sort of hearken back. One of my early guides in this area was David Maister. And anyone who works in consulting who hasn't read at least True Professionalism is, on a high wire without a net.
Interesting. You've been involved in podcasting yourself. How do you see podcasts playing a role for consultants in complex advisory spaces like yours?
That's a thorny one, John. And I've got to be careful not to offend my host here, right? So I'm putting on my dancing shoes, so I'm going to tread very carefully. There's a phrase in German, an Eiertanz. It means dancing on eggs.
Okay.
I think I worry that the podcast space is getting awfully full with an awful lot of good stuff. The problem isn't lack of good stuff. The problem is lack of time to sit and listen to podcasts. As I've transitioned, and I think a lot of people have transitioned post-COVID from being on a train for 45 minutes a day, being in a car for half an hour, 45 minutes a day, the time available in a day to listen to a podcast has gone way down. I think that means you need to have sharper messages and looking to engage. I view podcasts and the podcasts that I've done have all been exploratory. So we did a 6-part series on value inflection points. And the people on the podcast were a former FBI forensic psychologist who was a practicing psychologist, the former chief alliances officer at Eli Lilly, and the head of post-merger integration at the big mining giant BHP. And we had 6 podcasts. They were about half an hour each, which is long. But each one we started and we prepped for them. We did quite a bit of prep, but each one went somewhere interesting. Now, I have found there are people who like those kinds of podcasts and people who get frustrated by those kinds of podcasts. I think you have to choose your approach and live with it, and realize that it's not, there's not one podcasting format or approach that fits everyone. There are people out there who do, 12 to 16 minute podcasts. There are people out there who do, the Joe Rogans of the world who do 2 and 3 hour podcasts. I think you have to pick your niche. You have to read your audience and find out what people will listen to. You'll recognize when you go to a long form, especially as a consultant, I'm certainly no Joe Rogan. When you go to a long form, fewer people are going to sit and listen through the whole thing. And you have to be comfortable with that. If you're going with the punchy, we keep ourselves under 12 minutes, it's a different kind of a thing. So I think, however, like I said about, you don't make decisions, you make trade-offs, is decide what format you want to use. Decide, are you delivering a message? So I know what I want to say, I just need to say it effectively and I want to use a podcast. Or like David, Vicky, Tim, and I, are you exploring a topic and expecting to get somewhere that was different than where you started, but don't quite know what it is? And the 6 podcast series that David, Vicky, Tim, and I did, I would say 60% of it, we all could have predicted at the beginning of the podcasting adventure. We generated a whole bunch of new ideas through that adventure too. But that is a type. That is not, I won't say that's the right type. For some people, that is absolutely the wrong type. You will lose your audience. So I know that's kind of a non-answer, John, but I think you have to pick the genre of podcasting you want and the purpose of podcasting, and then keep yourself in that box. I would have a very hard time being on a scripted podcast if you haven't picked that up already. So if it comes to that kind of podcasting, I have partners I can go to who can be much more effective in that format. I tend to prefer the more loose
free flowing,
exploratory approach.
free flowing ones.
Yep.
Yeah. When you're dealing with senior executives in complex deals, how do you move from an initial conversation to actually being brought in to advise?
Well, if I think back over the last 4 or 5 situations we've been in, the ones we've been with before, so clients we've worked for before, there's one woman I'm thinking of right now who's been at several different companies, but tends to bring us in pretty regularly. In that case, she needs to get the senior management of her newer company. We've had a relationship with her for over a decade. She needs to get them comfortable that she's not just bringing in friends, but she's bringing in the right people. And so while they hired her and they trust her, we need to focus on making it really clear what it is we bring that is different than what someone else brings. With a new client, again, it depends an awful lot, but I wish I had a very simple answer for you, John. You notice me looking up over my shoulder. I think psychologists would tell you there's some deep meaning to that. I think it's just because I'm old. Yeah, I guess getting down in the dirt. I mean, the best way I can put it is we start talking about the tangible things. Have you experienced this before? Is this the kind of problem you've had on previous deals? Helping them to understand the granularity of what can go wrong and get out of we could have culture clash. Well, what in God's holy name is culture clash? If you ask 4 different people, you get 7 different answers on a good day. And not a single one of those answers will be of the least bit of use to you. So I find I've started working with AI over the last 6 months. And one of the things I have a whole file that I use with it, which is, extract all buzzwords from anything I write. We tend to use these words like synergy. I've run teams where I fine my team for using the word synergy. Because it has a whole bunch of vague meanings and everyone nods their head and nobody knows what in goodness name they're talking about. So I try to get very practical. I try to get very tangible, earthy, if you will, with my clients and say, it's very different to say, well, you could have integration problems on the HR side versus I can introduce you to an executive who showed up at the emergency room with his son who just broken his arm and found out that he didn't have health insurance because someone had screwed up the post-merger integration of the HR systems. That has a lot more resonance than integration problems or lack of synergy realization. The vision of a parent sitting in an emergency room with a injured child and no insurance brings things home. So I try to get earthy. But honestly earthy. It's not telling horror stories. These are things that really happen when people don't pay attention to those details.
You've worked with clients across multiple transactions. How do you retain clients over time and build those long-term advisory relationships?
Very, very challenging as a small firm. If you are a large firm, let's take my former and my sort of training ground for consulting, McKinsey. You have a relationship on a lot of different levels with them. So you'll be doing strategic work here and there, and when a transaction comes along, you're well positioned to get there. As a smaller firm, BTD and now Oaklin, our new universe, are less present day in, day out with the client. And as a result, it requires more actively getting out in front of them. So if you're in a large firm, really, when I was at Accenture, I had a much harder time getting through the client partner maze than getting to clients. Generally, when I got to clients, things went quite nicely. But a lot of times the client partners would be like, why should I let you near my client? It's like, well, they're about to engage in they're about to kick off a very large joint venture, and we've got something to say to them. So I found myself at Accenture doing a whole lot more selling of my own partners than I was doing of the client executives. Once we get in there, we tended to have, very high levels of success. In the world now, it's awareness. It's getting out in front of clients. It's speaking at conferences. It's participating in industry forums. It's writing articles. It can be podcasting, although I don't think there are many CEOs out there or heads of integration who spend a lot of time listening to podcasts. They might pare down. Someone who likes the podcast done here by Riverside, they might say, "Hey, that's the one I listen to." Well, then that limits that channel. So again, given the capacity of the executives, they're not, and acquisitions in most cases, alliances in most cases are episodic events, sometimes predictable, sometimes not. And as I say, if you're a bigger firm who has a long-term presence at a client, it's one thing. But if you're a smaller firm who's trying to come in at those moments, it's how you move quickly, how you keep your antennae up for what's going on, what kind of advanced scouting you do on things. And it's not easy. It's one thing to do it at our scale, which works quite well because of the networks we have and things. I think as you get up to a 600, 700, 2,000 person organization, it's much more challenging. You have to really be consciously at it because if you're not there towards the beginning, you're going to have a hard time getting there ever.
You find yourself stuck as a consultant in any capacity?
Say more about that, John. But by stuck,
Like, whether in growing North American practice or delivering this level of work on a regular basis, any obstacles or challenges you see?
I might not be the right person to give you a broadly useful answer to that at my age. Um, I love what I do. I have reasonable evidence that I'm quite good at doing it. And I don't have aspirations to change what I'm doing dramatically. So for me, I'm in a kind of a comfort zone, but I'm in my late 60s. Thank God I'm quite healthy. As I say, I love I bounce out of bed in the morning feeling good about work. I love the clients I work with. Uh, they're what keep me going, as well as some of the younger people I can coach and bring along. I think the answer might be very different from a 45-year-old than from a 68-year-old. So for me, stuck, not really. Not really. Um, but if I were aspiring to, build a practice in a much more grand scale, 45, looking to make senior partner at a big firm or looking to open a new office or something, I think I could feel quite different. There was a time in my life when that was um, what I was dealing with. Um, but thankfully, that's not. If you can go back and read some of Plato's dialogues about what it's like getting old, um, it's not nearly as bad as I feared it might be. But it brings a certain level of peace and comfort with what we've become good at. So, as I say, I'm probably not the ideal person to ask that question.
That's a good answer, though. That's an interesting answer, definitely. Looking ahead, where do you see the biggest opportunity for your work in M&A, alliances, and transformation over the next few years?
Hmm. I think technology is going to reorganize industries in funny ways. Now, let me start by saying, to my point about buzzwords, I'm tired of hearing about, game changers and all of this other malarkey. I believe that's a podcastable word. I have other words for it too that I will steer clear of. Um, any consulting firm who's publishing white papers or whatever they want to call them now, telling you they know what the pharmaceutical industry is going to look like in 5 years, is either deluding themselves or trying to delude you, more than likely both. We don't know. I've had the pleasure of traveling alongside the pharmaceutical industry since the mid 90s for the past 30 years and watched how it was reshaped by alliances, acquisitions, joint ventures, uh, first of all, venture capital money, then private equity money, uh, new technologies like high throughput screening, new technologies like big data, now AI. It's how I think today the challenge is how you can help, how I can help, how my firm can help executives to be successful today while creating the opportunities for the future. I remember being at a conference, and I won't name the company name, but the head of R&D for one of the top 5 pharmaceutical companies in the world was speaking. This conference was in 2001, I believe, late 2000, early 2001. And because I was flogging and doing a lot of alliance management consulting at the time, I asked a question. It was a big conference in New Jersey, big pharma conference. And I asked him, what is your company's view of strategic alliances in the pharmaceutical industry over the next 10 years? And his answer was very interesting. He said, at this company, we view alliances as a passing phase and believe that within the next 10 to 15 years, most of that will be coming back inside the companies again. Now, anyone listening to this podcast who has been around the pharmaceutical industry is either not believing the story I just told, or their eyes are rolling back in their head and they're laughing. Far from it. I was talking with Chris Black, who's the head of alliance management at Merck, a little company that some people may have heard of. He was describing an alliance that they are in around oncology therapies, not just around a drug, but oncology therapies. There are 8 major companies involved. They have 13 different governance committees that meet on a regular cycle, some of them as often as every 2 weeks. There are over 3,000 people seconded to this alliance. I can tell you, when I began working with Lilly in the late 90s, if you had told them about an alliance that looked like that, they would have told you were delusional and either asked for what you were having or run away from you. But those are becoming the reality now. Likewise, as technology changes, as companies try things and find out how they work, I think the biggest thing is going to be open to build, buy, borrow options. What should we do ourselves? What do we need to partner for? What do we need to buy? Alliances are not the poor cousin, well, we couldn't buy them, so we'll do an alliance with them. Each one of them has its own purpose. And within alliances, there's a whole range of things. What are the things we want to own and have complete control over? Those are really hard questions. And the answers to those questions are going to change as the locus of control, the locus of intellectual property ownership changes. So I think a lot of the advice now is, how can you succeed? How can you generate the cash flow and be successful today while having in place what you need as the industry evolves? And that doesn't mean guessing where the industry is going. It means keeping structures in place that allow you to make changes and still come out of it. And quite a bit of that resides in your people. You can only do so much with AI. You can only do so much with other technology. In the end, do you have people who are capable of looking at the world that way? And I think consultants can play a role in that when they don't get out over their skis and start thinking that they're seers rather than advisors.
Okay. Nick, great conversation. If people want to find out more about you and see what you do, where should they go?
Well, the first place to go is obviously Oaklin.com, Oaklin.com. I believe the old BTD website is still up as we're making the transition and coming into Oaklin. And I'm pretty sure we have rebranded all of the materials and gotten all of the white papers and things ready onto the Oaklin site. So I'll just leave it at Oaklin. There may be, if you go to btd.consulting, you may find a few things, but shame on me, shame on us if we haven't done a really good job of bringing that back over. I'm quite active around the Association of Strategic Alliance Professionals, which is ASAP, which is strategic-alliances.org. It's a global organization that was founded in 1998. I sat on the board for many years. Now I'm more just sort of an old guy who wanders around talking to the furniture at conferences and things. But we've got a conference coming up in London at the end of September, beginning of October. You'll find most of the big pharma companies there. You'll find quite a few tech companies and software companies there. Yeah, that's kind of. And I always welcome emails. I have an academic bent, as you can probably tell, despite all my talk about earthy, getting down in the mud with things. So I'm always open for discussions with people and talking. And again, they can find it's nick.palmer, nick.palmer at oaklin.com. But yeah, it's we're pretty easy. I'm a small fish in a modest-sized pond, so as long as it's a reasonably clear day, you can see me if I haven't stirred up too much mud in the bottom of the pond.
Okay. We'll put all the links in the description. Nick, thanks again for coming on Principal Podcast. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, John. I really appreciate the opportunity. It's been fun talking with you, and I hope everyone who listens takes at least one useful thing away from it.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Principal Podcast. We hope you've learned valuable lessons and strategies to grow your firm and take your business to the next level. Make sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you're listening to this show so you never miss an episode. To apply and be a guest on the show, click the link in the description. See you next time.